Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Tribal Council podcast. Where on this podcast, Survivor represents our life, and when it is gone, so are we. I am joined by my co-hosts, plural this time around, Connor Boudreau, and joining us again after a bit of a hiatus, Jessika Schroeder. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Yeah, doing pretty good today as well.
We missed having you on the podcast, Jessika.
Good to be here.
Now, to start out, I guess we'll talk about Emily Flippin, the first person eliminated this episode. She actually tried to make a pretty smart move here, I think, all things considered. She had a good idea and she executed it fairly well. Unfortunately, she got outsmarted by Suri. And do either of you want to kind of get us started on talking about Emily this season?
I mean, common mistake. He hasn't been outsmarted by Suri.
Many a Survivor player have been outsmarted by Suri. It just happens. That's what happens when you play the game with Suri. You get outplayed. How did
I
you?
don't know. I don't. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, how did you feel about Emily overall this season? Because you haven't seen her original season.
I thought that she shared too much information with random people, and I don't know. She wasn't anything too special in my eyes, I guess, this season. She had a good attempt at a play before she got kicked, but yeah, I don't know. I've never had very strong feelings about her other than why the fuck is she telling that to that person right now?
Yeah. I do think that this was kind of an underrated move on her part to try to convince people that Rick Evans was gonna play the idol on her. If Suri didn't have an extra vote, then it would have worked out perfectly. And nobody going to that tribal council, I don't think knew about Suri's extra vote. I believe only Rizzo and Ozzy knew about it. So if Suri didn't have it, there wouldn't have really been much that Suri could have done. So really, I think it was a really good play. I think it was a really good effort to try to make a move on Suri. And even with Suri's extra vote, I think there was a solid chance that it could have worked. Had Suri been just a little bit more confident, or had Emily maybe been just a little bit more convincing. But ultimately, unluckily for Emily, Suri caught on to what was going on. She had the extra vote. Or not even, she didn't necessarily catch on to what was going on, but she caught on to the fact that something might be going on and played her extra vote to be safe, and luckily worked out for her. Did not work out so much for Emily. What do you think about Emily this season, Connor?
I think her game can be summed up in a couple of different simple words. Stop telling everyone everything. Just too many situations where Emily would make the wrong choice by trying to gain or build with just some information that maybe you gotta hold your cards sometimes, right? There's an amount of information that you can pass in the game Survivor where it's still going to keep relationships at a high and keep building. And that's just a lot of what we got from the edit early. Come merge, Emily kind of cleans things up a little bit. Emily kind of finds her place in an alliance. However, I was also confused by the fact that at one point in the edit, we were showing Emily like questioning it. Do I got to turn on people? And it never really comes back around to a full fruition of like specifically trying to target out someone from that group that she was maybe worried about. And it's entirely why she ends up going out is that she just ends up being a number to that group for as long as, her game goes.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment of Emily's game. Now moving on, talking about Oscar Lust. Or I think, well, I was gonna say I think after this episode, uh, we should probably just call him Ozzy, considering his strategic play this episode is pretty mediocre, to say the least. However, he did have the very solid emotional content about his dad. Actually, a very nice full circle moment for his multi-season story arc, because kind of the end of his first season um, kind of featured him talking about his relationship with his father and how it was not that great. And now, so many years later on season 50, he's talking about how, his dad is no longer with him and how he feels like he was too hard on his dad. And um, I thought it was a very heartwarming moment. I thought it was a very good emotional storyline for Ozzy, which a lot of times is kind of one of the things that Ozzy is missing as a character on the show. Um, and I just want to talk about the fact that, like, outside of the very last moments that we saw of Ozzy on the season, this was probably my favorite iteration of Ozzy. I think he was the most fun, the most interesting version of Ozzy. He had some of the more engaging confessionals compared to some of his previous seasons. Um, and he was at least trying to do something different, unlike most iterations of Ozzy. Even if he wasn't necessarily that great at it, it was really nice to see him actually try to play the game um, in the way that he was trying to play it this time around. Unfortunately, the way he went out kind of soured me on him a little bit. I thought he was a little bit over dramatic and kind of a bit of a, for lack of a better word that I can think of right now, a bit of a baby. I don't think he went out with too much tact and grace. It kind of reminded me of Brenda from Survivor Caramoan. And that's just not how I tend to respect people going out, but at the same time, I understand that it would be very painful to be betrayed on on a show like Survivor, especially when you feel like you're in a good position. So he got cocky,
Mm-hmm.
he got outplayed, he didn't take it well. It's not a very likable look on him, but I also do understand to a certain extent. And I did actually enjoy him overall this season, which was a surprise for me because I wasn't necessarily happy to see that he was going to be on season 50. But do either of you have anything that you want to say about Ozzy?
Um, I was only really aware that he was big on challenges and stuff, so he was sort of almost like a blank slate in a sense to me when I started watching 50. I
That
don't know. He's definitely charismatic, and he what held a place in my mind a bit more than some of the other players.
yeah.
But I don't know, for some reason I was expecting to see a bit more from him, even though I haven't seen anything from him, so I guess, I don't know.
I think challenge wise, I mean, I was honestly just surprised that he was able to still compete to the level that he was able to at his age now at this point. But he unfortunately did not get to the career wide immunity record. He just needed to win one more. And unfortunately, he didn't quite get there, which means I will not be getting $10. Um, but
No,
I still have the opportunity to break even as long as Joe doesn't completely win out from here on out. So I'm feeling pretty decent about those odds. Um,
Your money's probably pretty safe, if we're being honest, but we'll get to that a little bit later. I'm focused on Ozzy for now, and yeah, I mean, as you were saying, this is one of the more entertaining Ozzy seasons, if not the most entertaining Ozzy season. I feel like Ozzy fell victim to the same mistake he's already made once. Not playing that idol is going to haunt him for a long time. And other than that, I mean, he made the best social relationship he's ever had. Someone was entirely looking out for him the entire game in a way that they weren't really ready to turn on him. It was kind of shown to maybe be brought up at this point, and one of his allies did turn on him in a sense, right? They let him go, but he did have an ally who truly was depending on him and relying on him in a way that he's never made this kind of connection before. Strategically, I guess, yeah, being babysat by Suri isn't like strategic marvel, but compared to what Ozzy has given us in past, this is a huge improvement. I mean, he was at least weighing options in a way that was more logical than just, I don't want this person here anymore. And that is, again, already a great step on the terms of playing Survivor in a way that you can win. And then, of course, yeah, still competing in challenges. Ozzy held his own and was pulling his weight for his tribe in the tribe stage. So, like, I really, this was the most complete, and we will never see a better version of Ozzy on Survivor ever again.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna drag Ozzy out for a sixth time, anyways. But I feel like he has kind of met his ceiling to where he tried his best to play a strategic game, and he was still fairly mediocre. I mean, he was prepared to go to the final two or final three with Suri. That in of itself is baffling to me. But ultimately, he definitely put in a good effort and was definitely more entertaining to me than he has been in the past. So I appreciate that we got to see him in his final form. Now on to the player that I'm sure we are all used to being at the bottom of the rankings by now. Tiffany Nicole Irvin. Was this a terrible episode for Tiffany? No, not really. She got what she wanted with Ozzy going home. Um, Emily going home. Maybe wasn't her, first idea, her first plan, but she was able to protect Suri, which is part of what she wanted to do. And she got a decent amount of content. So overall, this was not a bad episode for Tiffany, but realistically, there I can imagine at this point Tiffany moving up above Joe, depending on what happens next episode. I think it's fairly unlikely though. It would just take a miracle, honestly. It would take a horrific episode for Joe, which she kind of got this episode almost, and a phenomenal episode for Tiffany, which she did not get. She got a very middle of the road episode. And ultimately, I'm happy she's still in the game. I like Tiffany. I'm always happy to see her get more content, and four confessionals is more than she's gotten in the vast majority of episodes so far. But at the end of the day, she didn't leave a massive impression this episode. And she's still just kind of there.
Yeah. I was excited to see my girl Tiffany make big plays and do big things and get far, but unfortunately, unfortunately, I just don't think she has a lot of traction in the game aside from her winning the immunity challenges.
And so far, she's only technically won one. And I guess that's actually something we can talk about with Tiffany this episode was the immunity challenge, the fact that she was declared the winner, and then the tapes were reviewed, and it turned out that she had not raised her foot when Jeff told everyone to. Now, I'm gonna say I don't know. I think that there should have been a more a less ambiguous cutoff where Jeff was like, okay, if you don't have your foot up right now, you're out of the challenge. He kind of said okay, everybody raise your foot, and everybody kind of took a couple seconds to do it. So obviously Tiffany took considerably longer than everyone else to put her foot up. And I understand why they made the call that they did, but at the end of the day, I feel like there was a little bit of ambiguity there with sure, Tiffany took several seconds. A lot of people took, 1 or 2 seconds to get their foot up after Jeff said it. At no point was he like, okay, this is the cutoff. You need to have your foot up now or you're out of the challenge. I just feel like in an ideal world, there would have been something like that just to make things a little bit more clear. But at the end of the day, I think it was a fair call. It's unfortunate, though, that it went to Jonathan over Tiffany. I would have much preferred to see Tiffany win this immunity, mostly just so she could get a little bit more of a spotlight, being involved in both of the votes. But
Yeah.
It
When I
was,
thought that she won, I was very excited for her, and then
yeah,
very disappointed.
yeah. A lot of people were like online are being like, "Oh, she did it intentionally. She was trying to cheat and she got caught. I'm not cheering for her anymore. I hate her." And it's like, guys, nobody, nobody out there in Survivor is like intentionally not putting their foot up and just hoping that nobody notices. Like that's ridiculous. That's not.
Especially when there's however many judges.
Yeah, Jeff is there. There's multiple judges. There's so many cameramen and like, and nobody's just like trying to slip one by. Especially something that obvious. I think I highly
I
doubt
mean,
that
we can
she
go
did
back
it
to season
intentionally.
47 and
Yeah.
during the one challenge when Rachel tries stealing rice and putting it in her pocket. Like, people notice these things. It's not like it's just going to go under the radar. And I'm sure it was just a pure instinct. She just didn't realize to lift her foot in time, right?
Well, and even when Rachel was pocketing the rice, I don't think she did it under the assumption that she was like trying to get away with it. Like it was something that she was
Sure, it was
fully
a
aware
bit.
was against the rules, and she was trying to like trick production. I think she thought that it would be allowed and that they would just kind of let her do it, right? So
Yeah.
I don't think too many people out there are going out and thinking, yeah, I'm gonna get away with cheating, like especially like something that obvious, you know, like it just there's no way that they wouldn't notice
Especially
that.
in a game for $2 million now.
$2 million, exactly. I mean, there's an argument to be made that when $2 million are on the line, people are more incentivized to cheat. But also, when you know you're gonna get caught, there's no incentive to cheat, right? Um, you're just guaranteeing that you lose at that point. So I don't think Tiffany did it intentionally. I don't think she was trying to pull one over on production. Um, but you know, at the end of the day, I still understand the call that they made. It's just unfortunate and sad. But um, I think we can move on and talk about Joe. Now, Joe, the gap between him and Tiffany is slowly closing in for me as he continues to get negative content. You know, he was doxxed by Suri. Now everyone knows where he lives. Was it 500 Hypocrisy Road or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know, like if you were to get like a zero confessional episode, next episode, I think that would be enough for me to put him below Tiffany. Or if you were just to continue to get super negative content and Tiffany were to make some sort of big move and get some sort of significant content, he would probably move below Tiffany. He just has not had a good edit this season at all. His edit has just consistently been focused on the fact that he's not prepared to play the strategic, deceptive game that Survivor is, and he's just kind of getting on everyone else's nerves about it. Um,
It's really been highlighting his flaws. The overall edit.
yeah, season 48 was a very emotional journey for Joe, and a very like Joe is kind of the hero. He has this relationship with Eva, but even in 48, he was consistently being undermined by his own allies. He was portrayed as kind of gullible, and it's ultimately why he didn't win. And I just haven't seen any sort of adjustment from Joe to try to play the game better. In fact, if anything, he's kind of taken the wrong lesson from 48, where he's like, oh, on 48, I tried to play this like honor and integrity game, but I got tricked by Kyle and Camilla. Instead of going, okay, this is a game about, you know, deception, lying to people is part of it, and you have to navigate that. He went into this season as, I'm just not going to get tricked. I'm going to play the exact same game, honor, integrity, honesty, but I'm going to be paranoid constantly about somebody potentially lying to me, and I'm going to get very upset um, whenever it does happen. And I think he just took the opposite lesson than he should have out of 48. And we're seeing the results of that here, where he's playing basically. Well, a lot of people are playing similar games, but better to their previous seasons. Joe's basically playing the same game, but worse. And it's unfortunate to see. But do you have anything to say about Joe, Connor?
Yeah, go win me $17, Joe. No, okay. On a real note, Joe's edit has been anything but positive for most of the episodes, unfortunately, in a way that just like even though Tiffany has been so far out of it, as you mentioned, there is genuine consideration that she might move up at some point. Like that's how badly especially since like episode 2 Joe has been edited. Because honestly episode 1, you can look at it as like a pretty good episode for Joe. And like he was a legitimate like okay, not like top contender, but he was up there. Then all of a sudden he has this complete blow up with Rick. And ever since, the only time we've really seen Joe have strategic chops is like, oh, I don't like this guy. Is it strategic related? I don't know. I just don't like the guy, you know? And it's like, all right, so what is that doing for your chances to win the game? What is that doing for us to be able to evaluate something we've seen on screen and go, yeah, that guy's going to win this season? It doesn't help. It's just been a bunch of filler content. He's supposed to be this narration character, it feels like in the edit, except it's boring the way that they've edited him to be the narrator. And like, I don't know. I guess the funniest thing that's happened in the last couple episodes is him just not really knowing who Mr. Beast was, which isn't helping your odds of winning Survivor. So I don't think the edit has done him a single favor. And if we're looking at his actual gameplay, it has been bang average at best. Like there's been some elements of good, more elements of bad, not enough to do you any chances of winning the season. I could see him getting to the end of the game and being like a third placer that doesn't get voted again. You know, that's possible. Otherwise, I think the story for Joe is going to be that of not really learning from your own mistakes.
Hey, on season 48, he was a third placer who did get a single vote, actually. So there's a
I
little
don't
bit
know.
of a difference there. um, but yeah, two-time third placer would be tragic. I don't know that that's ever happened in Survivor history. I don't think it has. Um, but for Joe to be the first, it'd be understandable. It'd be somewhat fitting. Um, Now moving on to Jonathan Young. And I'm going to say the big thing about Jonathan, the reason he's been unable to move up, despite having a decent episode this time around, is the fact that he had the clearest possible shot to take out Suri, and he didn't take it. Now, am I going to sit here and say definitively that he should have taken the shot at Suri? I don't know. I don't know how much it would have actually helped his game to do so. We'll see later on. But I mean, I think there will probably be more opportunities to target Suri, and it's just a matter of whether or not he's going to take them eventually. Um, and getting rid of Emily weakens Rick. Rick is kind of somebody who isn't good for Jonathan's game. I understand the move to take out Emily. I don't even necessarily think it was the wrong move, but from an edit perspective, I look back at the swap, and I look back at Dee talking about how she likes Suri, she might want to potentially work with her, and Jonathan going, hey, Suri's dangerous. If you ever have a shot at her, if there's ever an opportunity to target Suri, you have to take it. She's too dangerous to keep her out of the game. And not only has he not brought her up as a target since then, once as far as I can remember, he had such a clear shot at her, such an obvious shot at her this episode, and he didn't take it. It's not so much that that's a bad move, it's the fact that that conflicts so strongly with what he has said previously that from an edit perspective, I think it's pretty damning that Jonathan probably isn't going to win this game. Because you have to keep in mind, they included that clip of Jonathan saying, if you have a shot at Suri, you have to take it. She's too dangerous. Knowing full well that he was going to have a very clear shot at Suri later on in the season and that he wasn't going to take it. It wasn't even really portrayed as much of a consideration for him. Mind you, on a revote, it can be difficult to portray that sort of thing. But, yeah, not a great look for him, and it's the reason why, despite having a pretty good episode, arguably a better episode than Rick, and the two of them were already pretty close in my rankings, he still was not able to move above Rick just for that one factor, and I think he's going to stay pretty low on my rankings just because of that. But at the end of the day, it's difficult to go down to the depths of Joe and Tiffany. So, do either of you have
Well,
anything to say about Jonathan?
um, yeah, I was just gonna say he even didn't get her out or lean more towards getting her out after finding out that he had a secret final two with Ozzy and a secret extra vote that episode.
That's very true. I didn't think about that. Like, especially the extra vote, because he had to have known, he had to have figured out that she was the one who played it, and the fact that she had this extra vote that she didn't tell him about, the fact that Ozzy had very clearly spelled out to everyone, well, to Aubrey, but Aubrey kind of spilled this information that Ozzy had a final two with Suri, and the fact that, like, sure, from Jonathan's perspective, he figured Ozzy's probably going home, so it's fine to keep Suri around. He still didn't know that. This was the first tribal of the two. Um, so, yeah, no, that's a very interesting point. That's a very good point. Just didn't even really consider taking up Suri, despite the fact that he learned all this information about her not really being totally honest with him. Um, yeah, no, that's not necessarily a great look, especially again considering his previous statements in the season. But before we move on, do you have anything to say about Jonathan, Connor?
Yeah, a couple of quick fun facts. With the two people that he helped vote out, because he was the only person at both sides of the tribal, he created a couple of fun first situations. Ozzy, first survivor to be voted out twice with a hidden immunity idol in his possession. He voted out Emily on the exact same day of the month, on the same episode, on the same day in Survivor, and made her the second player to be voted out as a result of an idol twice, along with, ironically, Suri. Um, so both of those happen in part due to Jonathan's decision making. And that's the focus of what I'm going to talk about for the rest of this section is decision making. Not only did he not go after Suri, not really think about it, not really consider it, when it was the most obvious thing you can ever do ever. If Suri's there, oh wait, she always is. Don't let her get to the end, vote her out. So he didn't do that. He does take out at least Suri's number one ally. So it is always a mix of good with bad, I find, with Jonathan this season. Anytime he does something really smart decision making wise, immediately right after, terrible things happen. And it's so baffling just how these decisions come across from Jonathan, considering that was such a huge focus of his early edit as well, was just, yeah, learning how to be strategic. Talking about how he learned from Rob Mariano, talking how he spent so much time really preparing to make bigger moves and actually play the game of Survivor better. And he has at several stages on many occasions. However, he's also just made some baffling decisions. And time again, I'm sitting there wondering, huh, what is the possible outcome in which this works out? Right? Where's the scenario where this is the right move for the rest of the season? And then sometimes he just makes the decisions like, yeah, okay, no, everyone would have made that. That was a good choice, like that's exactly what you want to do. So it makes it hard to kind of place him in the season as like a legitimate contender when there's just so many glaring moments that I can't place why that decision was made when his edit has spoken otherwise, compared to, as you mentioned, the next player we'll be talking about in Rick.
Yeah, Rick Devens. Well, since you kind of segued into Rick Devens, do you want to get us started on Rick Devens?
Yeah, Rick, I think definitely had a very interesting edit episode. I don't know necessarily that it was much bad to it, but there was definitely some very intriguing moments that I'm very much looking forward to and how they resolve. For starters, episode title was from a Rick confessional talking about how he wants to idle out Sari. I will love to see where that potentially flows into the next couple episodes. But either way, losing a number one ally makes it a little bit more difficult. That's not really an edit thing, just more of like a, game thing. It makes it a little more difficult to maneuver. However, he is at the point where his idol is at expiration. So he's going to have to use it at the next tribal.
Did he not play it
And
this episode?
oh yeah, sorry, no, he played it. Never mind. Uh, yeah, sorry, forgot about that part. Kind of important thing. Played his idol. So Rick stays in the game because of that. Loses number one ally. Game wise, sucks, right? However, it is a very interesting situation with Rick because he just has a knack for finding idols. He'll probably find another one. Even if he doesn't, Rick is just insane at pulling off bluffs. It moves, and he's already pulled one this season. Completely fooled people with the fake idol. Came clean about it, and it was a big moment for him in the edit a couple episodes ago. This time it was a big moment for like, let's try and idol at Suri. Let's try and make a big move. Let's try and do something crazy. And it almost happens. I mean, Suri having an advantage, that's never been seen before. That's not something you can play around. You don't have to worry about that. Suri never finds anything. So like makes the best strategic decision that could be made. And it still doesn't work out. But like again, a still pretty solid episode from Rick. I mean, if you look at the raw numbers, the confessionals are pretty decent, right? 2 this episode, not great, but 8 the episode before, 5, 4, 4, 6. So since the merge, been solid numbers, and you kind of need one down episode to make all the other ones look more reasonable. So I don't hate it.
Yeah. And I mean, he had to play his idol on himself. It wasn't like a misplay by any means. Losing Emily was kind of a forced error. I mean, they did their absolute best to try to keep them both safe, but unfortunately, it didn't work out. He did say he wanted to idol out Suri and made a very big point of that, and it didn't work out. Now, if that plays off in a way where he's able to find another idol and idol her out next episode or in the finale, maybe that could be a really good thing for Rick's edit. But the fact that it was so highlighted and the fact that he did ultimately fail, technically, maybe isn't a great thing. It's not terrible though either. Like, it's just what happened at the end of the day, and it was important to the story that they showed that. So I'm not gonna hold it against him too much. But yeah, no, I mean, Rick's edit has been solid. Um, I've enjoyed him on the season, but aside from playing his idol and unfortunately losing his closest ally, there wasn't a ton of content for Rick this episode compared to previous episodes. But do you have anything to say about Rick, Jessica, before we move on?
No, I enjoy watching him play and pulling off his little shenanigans, but if he doesn't find another idol, I have quite a bit of doubt that he would easily be able to pull off another fake idol or anything of that sort, especially on Survivor 50, where everybody's kind of aware of him and his shenanigans, and it's now $2 million, so people are. But that could also, I don't know, mix things up and make it easier for him to trick people. So, who knows? I'm just interested to see what he does next if he doesn't have any sort of protection.
Yeah, I guess I think that Rick is a very, very, very likely candidate to go home next episode. Um, like to me, it's kind of if maybe Suri goes home, in which case, obviously, she's not going to be the top contender anymore. But otherwise, Suri will stay as the top contender, and Rick will likely be next episode's boot. But that's just speculation. We'll see on Wednesday if that's what happens. Now moving on, and you can do the honors again, Connor.
It's your boy, the man, the myth, the legend, RIZ, Riz, God, baby. I love doing this part. It is my favorite part of every episode, and never take this privilege away from me. I'm doing it next season, and I don't care. Um,
Next
Rizzo,
season, even though he's not going to be on next season.
You don't know that.
I'll find a way to squeak it in one. Don't worry about it. I'll
Oh
find
my
a way.
god.
Um, so for Rizzo, I think this is a good bounce back from a couple episodes of a bit less content. Again, not necessarily negative, but he was kind of due for a bit of a pump up in the numbers, and we understand why he made the decision to get rid of Ozzy. That is something that I think could become a very interesting arc for him for the rest of the season. Is there backlash? How does that play out? Does this affect the relationship with Sari? Does this put him in a better spot to win the game come end game because he could have saved Ozzy, right? Does that burn Ozzy completely? And is that why he loses Final Tribal, right? There's a lot of ways that this could play out, and that are all at least very interesting. Are they great for the edit? That's a good question. I don't necessarily know that they're all fantastic things, but it shows him making a strategic move at the end of the day, at least, right? We understand why he made it. We understand the logic behind his decision, and I can't entirely argue against it, right? If Ozzy was going to bring Sari to the end, was Rizzo necessarily going to be brought as the third person? Was that even necessarily going to be possible, right? If Ozzy was going to focus on keeping Sari around, does that mean Rizzo was going to be sacrificed out of the group, right? If something had to come up where that three got targeted. So I can at least understand his decision making, and although it's not necessarily going to be the best outcome, that's to be determined. I feel like, at least from an edit perspective, we were given a good enough reason to understand exactly what his decision making process was, why he came to it, and how this moves him forward in the game.
Yeah. I'll say two things about Rizzo. One good, one bad. The good thing for Rizzo is I don't think that this is going to burn Suri necessarily. I think Suri will definitely understand why he made the decision that he made. And even at that, I think if Suri had all the information, there's a good chance that she would have been ready to let Ozzy go as well, knowing that Ozzy had just like completely spilled the beans about his and Suri's game. Like, that's not something that Suri would have appreciated by any means. That's something where I could see Suri making the decision to say, hey, I don't know if I can work with Ozzy anymore. He's more of a liability than anything. It's time to cut him, time to let him go. She might even appreciate that Rizzo had the sort of wherewithal to come to that decision, assuming Rizzo doesn't come to her and like tell her explicitly, yeah, I voted him out because he wanted to go to the end with you. That's a situation where if he explains it like that, obviously would not work out for him in his favor. But if he just explains Rizzo spilled the beans about everything about his game, about your game, uh, to Aubrey, and he completely blew things up, I feel like Suri will appreciate that Rizzo probably made the right move in that situation, because you have to keep in mind, well, she was really trying to um, create a situation where Rizzo would tell Ozzy that he was being targeted. Um, she didn't have all the information while she was trying to do that, and maybe if she did, she would have made a different decision. And I just don't think she's gonna necessarily blame Rizzo for making the decision that he did. However, from a jury perspective, I don't think there's any shot that Rizzo ever gets Ozzy's vote, and I do worry about his jury prospects in general because I don't really see him getting Stephanie's vote. I don't really see him getting Coach or Chrissy's votes likely. So that's already 4 votes where I'm like, is Rizzo really ever going to get those people's votes? I don't necessarily think so. And that's not great for him. But I do think if he makes some sort of big move from now to the end of the season and he makes the final 3, he still has a shot. It's why he's in the top 3 in my rankings. And I don't think this was a terrible episode for him. I don't think it was a perfect episode either. So he does drop down 1 spot. Particularly due to the fact that the person who was below him had a fairly good episode. But yeah. Do you have any thoughts about Rizzo this episode, Jessica?
Not really. I think he made a pretty good choice for his game, I think. I
Yeah.
think Suri, once she has all the information, will appreciate what he chose to do at least a little bit. Or like you said, at least understand. But I think overall he made the best choice for his game too, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, it will just be a matter of whether or not it ends up biting him in the ass later on, which,
Mm.
we'll see. Um, Now on to Aubrey Bracco, who I think this episode solidified herself as a top contender. Um, she took the information that Ozzy gave her and she really ran with it to make a move against Ozzy. Finally, making the move that she had been kind of teasing the entire season. And I get it. Like, I think it was last episode, maybe the episode before, that she really highlighted the fact that she was trying to play this game where she sort of blended in until the final stretch, and then she could make her moves in that final stretch. And we're starting to see the beginning of that with her really being the catalyst for Ozzy's elimination. Now we'll just have to see, what does she do next episode. Does she continue with this momentum? Does she continue making big moves? Does she build up her resume in the little time that she has left in the game? It's tough to say, but I think given the edit that she's been given so far, it is quite likely. I still don't have enough confidence to put her in my top spot. My main reasoning being that, well, I think this is a realistic winner's edit. I think this is an edit that, like, reads like a potential winner's edit. It, as I've said time and time again, it reads like an unsatisfying winner's edit. It reads, actually, funny enough, very similarly to Michelle, on Co Wrong, where it's like, casual fans did not see Michelle's win coming whatsoever. The Edgic people figured it out super early on. Yeah, Michelle's winning this season. This is clearly a winner's edit. And they weren't wrong, but it was still a bad winner's edit. Something can be a clear winner's edit from an Edgic perspective and still be a bad winner's edit in the sense that it's just not a satisfying storyline for a winner. And that's very much what I'm getting out of Aubrey's edit. And that's kind of what's keeping her out of the top spot. Even though realistically, you could make an argument for her there. There's just another player who's also, in my mind, getting a very realistic winner's edit and getting a much more satisfying one, uh, keeping her above Aubrey for me. But do either of you have anything that you want to say about Aubrey?
No, not really. I relatively agree with your sentiment on the matter. Sorry.
It's okay.
I'll
Jessica's
say
just
this.
in her car. There's some background noise, but it's all good.
Mhm.
I'll say this with Aubrey. I think with Aubrey, the edit is definitely, as you said, maybe unsatisfactory. However, the version of Aubrey we got, I think, has also still been fairly entertaining, and I've been enjoying it personally. I have really loved a lot of the callbacks that have been given through the edit to her original season in Korong. I mean, you mentioned Michelle. This is for, the second or third straight episode in a row where she makes a direct callback to that season in her confessionals, this time in a voting confessional. She says, "Don't play your idol tonight." The exact same thing she says around the same time in the game, where guess what? She was trying to get someone voted out who had an idol, and it was kind of a blindside. We weren't really sure it was going to work, and it does. So, you know, now mind you, that situation was a little different because that depended on someone else playing an idol on top of one person wanting to play an idol because, haha, super idol shenanigans. But this is still, again, another fun little moment that we're getting from Aubrey that they're trying to throw in, I think, for a reason, because if not, we're just getting all these little random callbacks, and I couldn't tell you why. So, to me, as much as I hate to see it, because I think that means that our number one from the last, billion years is probably not necessarily the true number one at this point. I think I'm starting to see the little moments they're throwing in there to show us exactly why Aubrey is meant to try and be edited into a win. And it's because they just haven't been giving us other entertaining content in other places that they're trying to throw in these little moments here and there to kind of smooth that over and pretend like we're just not supposed to see it.
Yeah, I won't be necessarily happy if Aubrey wins, but I won't be surprised either. Um, Luckily, I do still see a fairly solid contender in my number one player, Suri. I think this was a phenomenal episode for Suri, actually. Ultimately, she kind of sniffs out Emily and Rick's plan. She outplays them, winds up being able to save herself, takes Emily out of the game, who's coming after her. And she even has a considerable amount of control over what's going on the other side of the beach, where she's not allowed to actually go and talk to people. Like, just through Jonathan, somebody who isn't necessarily her closest ally, she still has enough control and agency over Jonathan that he just does exactly what she wants him to do. And it's just a matter of, like, she can only have so much control over someone like Rizzo, who she isn't able to talk to directly. But she is able to get Jonathan to allow Rizzo to know about the plan. And in an ideal world, that would have turned into, well, an ideal world for Suri, that would have turned into Rizzo telling Ozzy that he's on the chopping block, telling him he needs to play his idol. Um, Unfortunately, due to circumstances fairly beyond Suri's control or knowledge, even, that's not what happens. But I still think that the way it's portrayed, the way that she has this level of control over just one player, Jonathan, who isn't even someone she's super duper connected to the point where she's able to, through him, have a considerable amount of control over what went on in the other vote. Again, obviously not complete control, she didn't get what she wanted, but enough control to be massively impressive. Only Suri could truly have that much control over a vote that she isn't even present for. Um, and I just think that it was portrayed wonderfully. I think that she continues to be definitely the number one contender out there to win if you're just like looking from a logical standpoint. I think she's positioned really well with people who just aren't really motivated to go after her for one reason or another. And if she makes it to the end, I think she wins no matter what. It's just a matter of, does she make it to the end? And I think there's still players left in the game like Rick, maybe Aubrey, potentially even Rizzo, who are gonna eventually be looking to make a move on Suri, and that's where she could potentially find herself in hot water. She isn't known to find idols, she isn't known to win immunities, she isn't known to win fire making, so she's gonna have an uphill battle unless she's able to kind of surprise us and pull out one of those three things. But at the end of the day, the edit is just screaming that Suri is the top contender to me, and it might be a little bit overblown to the point where she feels more like a final boss type. Whoever takes out Suri is the winner, and I do think if she doesn't win, that's definitely the case, 100%. Whoever takes out Suri is going to instantly jump to the top of my rankings, unless it's like Joe or Tiffany, probably. Um, but for season 50, I could really see them giving their winner just a very solid, straightforward winner's edit, where you're meant to root for them from start to finish, and that's exactly what Suri is getting. So I still have a lot of hope for Suri, enough to keep her at the number one spot on my rankings. Um, but I am not as hopeful as I have been for the last few episodes. But before we wrap things up, anything that you guys want to say about Suri?
I'm definitely rooting for her. I just hope that she doesn't fall into the same pattern of getting screwed over or going home to unfortunate circumstances.
Well, regardless, in the technically 6 times that she's played Survivor now, if I'm yeah, this is her fifth time making it to the final 7, so that's kind of insane. Um, Also, Suri this episode became the first person ever to actually save themselves with an extra vote. Only one other person I think in Survivor history has effectively played an extra vote to actually have an objective like impact on the final vote, and that was Marianne on season 42. when she used her extra vote to take out Omer. Suri is the first person to ever actually save herself with an extra vote. That's pretty cool. I mean, not that Suri needed any more accolades, but that's just another badge that she can wear.
The first advantage that she has, and she uses it very well.
Very true. Very, very true. What about you, Connor? Anything to add on about Suri?
Yes. I will also say this. Technically, there was another time that someone did use it in an objective way that it made an impact. However, it didn't exactly, I guess, work the way that it was intended to, because Laurel did in Ghost Island save themselves with an extra, or sorry, Kellen saved someone with an extra vote that season. Michael goes out because of the tie. Uh, so that was a third instance, to clarify on that. Another fun fact is Suri. This is the first time in an American version of Survivor in which she has received more than 3 votes in a single season. Did y'all know that? 5 times playing is the first time she's got more than 3 votes in an American season. That is an
It's
insane.
wild.
That is
Like,
crazy. I was not
it
at
is
all aware.
unbelievable how just purely Suri can dominate a season. And like it just blows my mind that people have allowed Suri to get this far. Because as we have said for like 3 or 4 episodes now, and we can't say it enough, if Suri gets to the end, Suri wins. When Suri probably doesn't, because this is Survivor and she is cursed to never make it to the end, whoever does it typically goes on to do pretty good. The real exception to that rule would just be haha heroes versus villains, where she goes out so silly early that like it's kind of impossible to assume that, you know, the winner of that season is going to be just like from a very early heroes tribal. But I mean, if you look at every other situation in which she's been removed from the game, somehow that has impacted who has won the season. And at this point, it's the only situation that most people or anyone that really is trying to look at this from a deep, impactful standpoint can assume is if she gets in, she wins. If not, it more than likely decides the winner.
I mean,
And it's just a matter of who's the person to be, you know, the one to actually remove Suri from what is more than likely the last time we'll ever see Suri in a Survivor game.
I mean, I'm gonna push back against a couple things there. First of all, Kellen's extra vote play did not impact the final result. Had she not played it, Michael would have gone home there without a tie. When she did play it, there was a tie. Michael went home anyways on the revote. So she
She at
actually,
least forced a tie. It did do something, right? It could have possibly
again,
impacted the vote.
keyword could have. That's a very key word there. Is it didn't. Like at the end of the day, the result of the vote was the same. So that that doesn't really change the statistic in my mind. But also, not to mention, she voted for Michael in the revote. She was trying to play this extra vote to save herself because she thought she was the target when she wasn't. So she was forcing a tie for no reason, anyways. Which it's really funny because she played 2 votes for Laurel, Michael received 2 votes, and then on the revote she didn't even vote for Laurel. She was like, actually, you know what? Yeah, Michael can go home. So that is a situation where I don't think the extra vote really mattered. I think it was pretty significant misplay. Other thing I'll push back on, Micronesia, if I'm not mistaken, Amanda wins final immunity and then casts the soul vote to eliminate Suri, and she does not win the season. So I don't know that I would necessarily call that the person taking, like, the person who took her out really having much of an effect on the winner. Um And then on her original season, if I'm not mistaken, does she not go into fire making against Terry? I'm trying to remember.
Ooh, I don't actually.
I'm trying to find that information because it's not. Oh no, it was Danielle. So actually, 2 seasons that she's played, the person who was technically most responsible for taking her out, um, ended up coming in second place. So
Is it? I was looking at that one as RS1 immunity and put the only person that I think had a legitimate shot to beat him in a fire making contest.
he voted for Danielle, that tribal, so he didn't put Suri into a fire making contest.
Okay,
Even.
there you go. I couldn't remember if he voted correctly or not. So, yeah, fair point.
In fact, Danielle voted for Suri, obviously. I mean,
Yeah.
Suri and Danielle would have had to have voted for each other. So just to push back a little bit, I do think this season for sure, whoever takes out Suri, just the way that the edit is going, has to be the winner. Unless it's like in the case of like Danielle, I don't think she was ever really much of a contender to begin with. So if it was someone like Joe or Tiffany, then maybe that's the exception. Uh, but if anyone else takes out Suri, I feel like their odds of winning at the very least just skyrocket significantly. So, um, that being said, I just want to quickly talk about the twist, and just say I think it was a solid twist, but I think it was a little bit late into the season. I don't necessarily think that it should have been like super early on into the merge, but like final 10 maybe I think would have made a lot more sense for a twist like this. Um, or I guess I don't know, the final 10
11.
would technically work. Maybe final 9 even more so. This was final 9, so I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, final 11 probably makes the most sense. Final 9 is such an important vote, or it tends to be on Survivor, that I just don't love that this twist was introduced so late, but I get that they had to do multiple double boots this season. I think any double boot twist is going to be misplaced this late on, which is kind of why I wish they did more just in the pre-merge, but whatever. At the end of the day, I think we're done without double boots. Could be wrong, but I think we are. Um, and that's all I really have to say about the twist. I think it's a decent twist. I like the idea of having one person attend both tribal councils. So, pretty neat. Just a little bit late into the season, or poorly timed to a vote where that would ordinarily be very important and impactful when everyone is kind of together on one beach. I don't love the constant splitting people up all the time. It's just kind of to me, but ultimately, in a vacuum, I don't hate this twist by any means. But anything you guys want to say quickly before we wrap things up officially?
No.
Two things I was going to say. Um, One, unfortunate for Aussie, 149 days of Survivor is an insanely high number, and it is an impossibly high number to reach. However, it does mean that he is still fourth place. He's behind Parv, he's behind Suri, he's behind Rob in total days played, and that is unfortunate. Uh, it's insane that he made it this far into the season, and impressive nonetheless. Um, which brings us to my second point. The only pre HVV player left, the only player who has more than 4 games of Survivor played, and the one and only Suri playing an advantage correctly. So many insane milestones that have been hit this season. I was going to ask, what do you think is the next milestone and next big moment hit in this season? What do you think is the next like true thing that we get that has never happened before?
Suri wins. Yippee. I don't know. One thing that isn't necessarily close to happening, but Suri does officially become the person with the second most confessionals like just career wide in Survivor history, behind I believe Boston Rob. Um, she would need like 40 confessionals in the last two episodes of the season to actually hit number one. So much like Joe, I don't think she's actually taking that record. But you know, it's a possibility. Technically, there's it's highly, highly unlikely, but it's technically a possibility. Um, Either way, she solidifies herself in second place, with Ozzy taking third, and now that he's voted out, he obviously won't be able to overtake her. So I think that's pretty cool. As for the next like real milestone, it's tough to say. Nobody's really close to that 6 immunity um challenge wins, and I don't think anybody could take that at this point. So maybe Joe does hit the record. Maybe I
Tiff
don't
could
know.
tie or break the female record, if I'm not mistaken. She's at 1. She could win out, get 4. Huh? I don't know.
Could she? Yeah, I guess. Yeah, technically she could, and technically Jonathan could hit 6. That's possible. Um, because there should be 4 more immunity challenges. Technically, there's 7 people left. So no. So
Good.
yes, there should be. Unless there's another
Yeah.
double boot sort of thing going on. So yeah, I mean, Tiffany could potentially break the female challenge record. That we haven't really been shown that that's something that's likely to happen. Again, same with Joe, beating the male single season challenge record, and then also in the same breath beating the career wide challenge record. Those are the only two things that like are pretty definitively on the table. Maybe we see every single person at the final 6 or final 7 receive 1 vote. That could happen. Why not? I guess it technically couldn't because someone will be immune, but like everyone who's not immune, I think that would be a first. That'd be funny. But I don't know. It's hard to predict that sort of thing because you have to think about like what hasn't happened yet, and it can be difficult to think about what hasn't happened yet.
No, I'm gonna make an ambitious guess. I'm gonna say one that I think could happen this season and could help define someone's game. I think we see for the third time, if I'm remembering correctly, in Survivor history, someone give up an individual immunity.
It's happened 3 times already.
Fourth time then. Perfect. I forgot one. I knew I was forgetting one. Fourth time in Survivor US history, someone giving up individual immunity. I'm going to make the guess that that happens at some point in this final couple episodes. And then someone tries to make a big move out of it, play an idol, it blows up. That's my guess.
Look, maybe I could see Rizzo giving up immunity, and well, no, because everyone would know that he has his idol. It would have to be somebody who finds an idol next episode and then does it
Like
maybe.
Rick.
Yeah, I could see somebody giving up immunity, and then if they had an idol to be like goading all the votes onto them, and then they play their idol and they get to decide who goes home. Or alternatively, this would be insane. Rick gives up immunity and goes like, "It's like I don't need it because I have an idol to keep himself and one other person safe," and like does like an idol bluff that way, where people are like, "There's no way he'd be insane enough to give up immunity if he didn't have an idol." But I highly doubt that would happen. So I think that's quite a bold prediction. Um, I don't think it's likely, but I suppose it's definitely possible. It could happen. Why not? Um, It'd definitely be entertaining, that's for sure. But ultimately, I think that just about wraps it up. It was a good episode of Survivor. I'm very excited to see what happens next, and we're getting closer and closer to that finale. Getting closer and closer to that season 51 preview. So a lot of exciting stuff in the future. But that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Hope you guys enjoy the next episode of Survivor. But until then, the pod has spoken.